Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to talk to the hunter who is putting in the work but not getting consistent results. You're hiking the miles, you're putting in the time, you've had close calls, moments where it almost came together, but season after season, it's not stacking into repeatable success. And that is very frustrating. And most guys respond by trying to work harder, cover more ground, try new tactics, change their gear. But the real problem usually isn't effort and gear, and it's not the obvious mistakes. It's the mistakes that feel like you're doing things right, and that's what keeps elk hunters stuck. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter and outdoorsman. You are not failing because you don't care. You're failing because you don't see what's actually going wrong, and I'm going to try to help you see that because that's a different problem. This episode is not beginner advice necessarily. We're not going to talk about surface level tips or things you already know. This is about blind spots, the patterns and decisions that quietly cost you opportunities without you ever realizing it a lot of times. What I'm going to do is break down what's actually happening in the field versus what you think is happening and try to help you identify exactly where you're losing encounters so you can fix it and start building more consistency. Mistake number one, you're hunting places elk don't want to be. This is one of the biggest hidden mistakes in elk hunting, and it starts with something a lot of guys never question. What looks like good elk country? Elk hunters are naturally drawn to big basins and open ridges and country that just feels right. It's scenic, it's visible, it's elky, it looks like the kind of place elk should be. And because of that, it builds confidence. You feel like you have a plan, but confidence doesn't necessarily mean it's correct because pressure changes everything. Elk don't choose terrain based on what looks good to you. They choose it based on what allows them to survive. In pressured environments, their priorities are clear: security cover for daylight safety, predictable wind that lets them detect danger, tight movement zones where feed and bedding are pretty close together, and positions that keep them hidden even when pressure is nearby. That's where the disconnect happens. What looks like great habitat to an elk hunter is often too exposed or too predictable and too accessible. Meanwhile, the places elk actually are, where the places that they're using are easy to overlook, like broken timber and mid-slope benches that we talk a lot about, and dark transition zones where visibility is limited but control is high. Those aren't the places a lot of hunters want to spend time, but they're the places elk trust. And here's the mistake: you trust what looks right instead of what actually functions right. And that leads you into areas that are easy to hunt but empty of elk. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post-Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory. It's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. The shift here is simple, but it's not easy. If it's obvious and easy to hunt, it's probably not where elk feel safe on public land. So until you start thinking like that, you're going to keep hunting country that looks good instead of country that actually holds elk. Mistake number two, you're moving too much and calling it hard work. This is one of the most common mistakes and one of the hardest to recognize because it feels like you're doing everything right. You're covering a lot of ground, you're hiking hard, you're pushing deeper, and in your mind, that equals effort. It feels productive, but a lot of times it's not. Constant movement resets your understanding of an area every single time you relocate. You never stay long enough to actually learn how elk are using that piece of country. You bounce from drainage to drainage or ridge to basin, always searching, but never building a clear picture, and that's a problem. Elk don't use the landscape the way a lot of elk hunters move through it, especially under pressure. Elk tighten up. They use smaller, repeatable zones. They move in controlled patterns between feed, transition, and bedding. And most encounters don't happen immediately. They happen after time is invested and patterns can start to reveal themselves. The best elk hunters I know understand this. They don't just keep moving because things feel slow. When they get into elk, they slow down. They pay attention. They refine their understanding of that area instead of abandoning it too early. So here's the mistake. You're addicted to movement instead of committing to understanding and building your knowledge. And that keeps you stuck in a constant reset. This is the shift that changes everything. Movement should be a decision, not just a habit, not just something that you do randomly. Sometimes you should move, but it should be based on information, not just impatience and hope, because most of the time you're not struggling to find elk. You're struggling to stay with them long enough to figure them out. Mistake number three, you think you understand wind, but a lot of times you don't. This is one of the most damaging mistakes in elk hunting because it doesn't feel like a mistake at all. I have guys write me every single week who truly don't understand how thermals work. They don't understand the definition of a thermal and that it's dictated by heat. Most elk hunters believe they understand wind. They might check it. They keep it in their face, the directional kind of wind, and they assume they're doing it right. But that is surface level basic understanding, and it leads to invisible failures. Wind in elk country does not behave in clean, predictable patterns all the time. Thermals don't just rise in the morning and fall in the evening the way a lot of people describe them. Midday winds can override thermal direction completely. Evenings don't flip from uphill to downhill. They transition slowly a lot of times. They can stall. They can shift in ways that are hard to detect unless you're paying close attention and you're experienced. Then you add in terrain. Timber traps air and causes it to drift and pool unpredictably. Benches create lateral movement where scent travels sideways instead of up and down. Bowls and basins create constant swirling where wind direction changes without warning. Elk understand this a lot better than we do. They position themselves to take advantage of it. They bed where they can scent check both above and below. They use terrain features to control airflow. And mature bulls a lot of times expect inconsistencies in the wind, and they rely on those inconsistencies to help them detect danger. Here's the critical truth here. You are blowing elk you never see. And the mistake is simple. You're just checking wind direction, but you're not understanding wind and thermal behavior. And that difference is everything. The shift you need to make is this. You're not hunting elk, you're managing air. If the wind is not predictable in your setup, then the setup is not huntable. And until you understand that, you're going to continue to lose opportunities without ever knowing why. Mistake number four, you're always one step behind the elk. This mistake shows up as effort, but it's really a positioning problem. Most elk hunters spend their time reacting. They hear a bugle and move toward it. They find fresh sign and commit to where elk were. They see elk in the morning and go back to that exact spot the next day expecting the same result. And every one of those decisions puts you behind. Elk movement is not random. It follows structure. They feed in low light, they transition through specific terrain, and they bed in secure locations during the day. And that movement happens through predictable routes, shaped by terrain and controlled by wind. If you're reacting to elk, you're chasing the past. The shift is moving from a pursuit mindset to an interception mindset. Instead of asking where elk are, you need to ask where they are going and what terrain forces them to move a certain way. That's where you start to gain control. High value locations are the places where elk don't have unlimited options. Benches that allow easier travel across steep country, saddles that connect two sides of a ridge, side hill trails that keep elk in cover while they move. thermal safe corridors where wind gives them an advantage. Those are all decision points. Elk move efficiently and securely. They choose routes that protect them, not routes that are convenient for you to hunt. The mistake here is that you are reacting to elk instead of positioning ahead of them. The shift is just as simple. The goal is not to find elk, the goal is to intercept them or predict where they're most likely to be. Because if you're always reacting, you're always going to be late. Mistake number 5, you're chasing success instead of building consistency. This is one of the most common traps in elk hunting, and it keeps a lot of elk hunters stuck for many years. Most guys are focused on outcomes, killing an elk, finding the right calling sequence, figuring out what worked for somebody else and trying to apply it to your situation. Everything is centered around getting a result in the moment, right? But almost no attention is given to how your decisions are being made. There's no structure, no repeatable process, just a series of random attempts hoping something works. And every once in a while, it can. But that doesn't mean you're figuring anything out. One success without a system is luck. It's not skill. And if you want to become consistent, you need a process that you can run every single day in the field, something that guides your decision and builds understanding over time. A simple version of it might look like this. You locate. Are elk actually here right now? Evaluate. Is this situation huntable based on wind, terrain, and pressure? Position. Where do you need to be to intercept or predict their movement? Number 4 is execute. Make a controlled, intentional approach. And number 5, and we skip this one a lot of times, is adjust. Learn from what just happened and refine your next move or your next hunt. And that's how consistent elk hunters operate. They don't rely on just random moments. They rely on structure, whether they know it or not. They learn from every encounter and build patterns that carry forward. The mistake is chasing success instead of building something repeatable. You're chasing moments instead of actually building a system for yourself. So the shift here is simple. Stop asking, how do I kill an elk? And start asking, how do I become a consistent elk killer? Because systems create results. Random success doesn't, in my experience, at anything in life. Most of the mistakes we talked about in this episode are invisible while you're making them. And that's what makes them so hard to fix and why I want to talk about them a lot. Because you can be putting in real effort, doing everything you think is right, and still be stuck in the same cycle year after year. How do I know? Because I've been there. Because effort without awareness doesn't lead to improvement. It just reinforces the same patterns, and I've been stuck in that too. This is where you need to slow down and take an honest look at how you're actually hunting. Not what you intend to do, but what you consistently do in the field. Identify which one of these mistakes applies to you right now, because that's where your biggest opportunity for growth is. You don't need more outward effort in terms of covering more miles. You need better awareness and better decisions understanding elk. That's what changes outcomes. The fastest way to improve as an elk hunter isn't doing more in the field. It's seeing what you've been missing, seeing what mistakes you've made, adjusting and fixing those, right? If you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands-on application and real-time breakdowns, we have an in-person Elk Camp 2026 that is built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real terrain. 90% of Elk Camp is going to be about running you through real scenarios. You can check that out at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.